Welcome to a deep dive into, perfectionism, something I think we all struggle with from time to time.
It really is fascinating. You know, we talk about so many things as things to recover from, and perfectionism is always framed that way, like it's a disease.
Right, like we need to recover from it.
Yeah, and this whole deep dive, it kind of made me realize it's not about getting rid of that drive to be excellent. It's more about what we do when things go wrong, inevitably.
Yeah, because they always do.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So how do we deal with that? So one of the things that I thought was really interesting that the book starts with is this idea of the perfectionism continuum. I always thought of it as like you either are or you aren't a perfectionist, but it's obviously more nuanced than that.
Yeah, I think it's about getting away from this illness model that we have where it's like, if you are this way, then it's inherently bad or negative and you need to dismantle that part of yourself.
Yeah.
When really it's more about like, okay, how can we manage this and what does it look like for you?
So instead of erasing it, it's about understanding it and working with it.
Totally. And she breaks it down really well in the book. She has these 5 different types of perfectionists.
Okay.
So you have your classic perfectionist who's like super organized, detail-oriented, always striving to meet their own very high standards.
Color-coding calendars.
Exactly.
The sock drawer is perfectly
Like they love that.
organized.
Yep. Then you have intense perfectionists, and they're also very achievement-oriented, but they focus more on other people meeting their standards.
Oh, so that's more outward.
Yeah, very outward,
Right.
which can obviously cause some issues.
Yeah, a little bit of friction.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And then you have Parisian perfectionists, which is kind of a funny name.
Well, it does sound like an oxymoron.
It does, but it's this idea of like, they are very much about aesthetics and presenting a certain image, but they're also really social and care about connecting with people in a genuine way.
So it's like that carefully curated Instagram feed,
Yeah.
but also like a really nice dinner party.
Exactly. It's about the vibe. And
Yeah.
then you have procrastinator perfectionists, which is a very specific type. So they'll have all these ideas and really high standards, but they're so afraid that they won't get it perfect the first time that they just don't start.
Oh my God, this is me.
Yeah,
It's like debilitating fear.
totally.
Yeah.
And then the last one is a messy perfectionist.
Okay.
So this is someone who like dives into all these projects and has all these ideas, but they have trouble with follow through.
Oh, they get like a little lost in the weeds.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's like big picture, but not the details.
I love this because it's so true that like we're not just one of these things, right? Like I definitely resonate with that procrastinator perfectionist.
Right.
But depending on the situation, I can definitely see the other ones coming out too.
And that's what's cool about it is it's not like you have to fit into one box. It's really just about understanding the nuances of how it shows up for you.
And one of the things that I thought was really interesting is this idea that it's not just about seeking external validation like we've always been told, but it's about self-worth. And I think that's a really important distinction.
It is a really important distinction. And the book gives an example that I thought was so helpful of, you know, if you are somebody who is driven to excel in their career because it genuinely fulfills you, that's like the adaptive perfectionism.
Okay.
But if you're like chasing this high paying job that you actually hate because you just want the external validation, then that would be more maladaptive.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
And it actually reminds me of this time where I was like, if I can just get this promotion, then I'll finally feel worthy. And I was like working myself to the bone and like neglecting everything else in my life. And then I got it. And it was like the feeling lasted 5 minutes and it was gone. You know, it was like,
Yeah.
oh, it really does have to come from within.
It really does. It's not about that external validation. It's about cultivating that sense of worthiness from the inside out.
Yeah, so much of this is really counterintuitive to the way that we've always thought about this.
It really is. It's about flipping the script on how we view perfectionism and how we can use it to our advantage.
Yeah. And I think that's a perfect segue to our next point, which is the book argues that the real problem isn't actually perfectionism itself.
Yeah.
It's how we react when we inevitably screw up.
Totally. It's like we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then when it does, we're like right back in line.
Yes.
And that's what throws us off course.
It's so true. It's like we set these impossible standards, and then when we don't meet them, it's like we don't know what to do with ourselves.
Yeah.
And the book tells this really great story about this woman, Ava, who's battling addiction, and, you know, she's having a lot of progress. And then she has this setback, and
Yeah.
I don't want to ruin it, but her self-talk after this setback is something that I think so many of us can relate to.
Oh, absolutely. And what's so cool is the book doesn't just talk about this from like a psychological perspective, but also the neuroscience behind it.
Oh, really? Tell me more about that, because I'm fascinated by this.
Yeah. So basically, like when we're in that cycle of self-criticism, our brain literally can't function properly. It goes into fight or flight mode, so it's like so busy sounding the alarm that it can't actually problem solve effectively.
That is so interesting because I've definitely noticed that, like, when I'm stressed out and feeling bad about myself, that's when I get like tunnel vision and I can only see the problem. I can't see the way out.
That's exactly what it is. It's like your brain is not able to see other options.
Wow.
And that's where the shift from control to power comes in.
Okay, so what's the difference?
So control is this idea of if I can micromanage every aspect of my life to get a certain outcome, then I'm powerful, but that's an illusion.
Okay.
Authentic power is about recognizing that we can't control everything, but we can control our choices and our responses.
I love that.
Yeah.
So it's about what we can control.
Exactly.
And letting go of the things that we can't.
Exactly. And the book actually talks about the power of losing control.
Okay.
And she tells this great story about a client of hers named Alicia who would come into therapy and take naps. Well, it's not like the traditional image of therapy that we have.
Not what you'd expect.
Right. But it was what she needed in that moment to regulate herself and to really show up.
And it's about like honoring her own needs right in that moment.
Exactly. And so often we're told like what we should be doing or how we should be acting. And it's so important to just listen to our own inner wisdom.
Oh my gosh, I needed to hear that.
Yeah.
That's huge because I think a lot of us, and especially perfectionists, we run ourselves so ragged and we think we should be able to handle everything. And sometimes maybe a nap is the most powerful thing you could do.
It really is.
So how do we make that shift? How do we ditch that need for control and step into that authentic power?
Well, she gives 7 really incredible tools in the book for managing perfectionism.
Okay, 7 tools. I'm ready. What's the first one? Okay, 7 tools. I'm ready. What's the first one?
Okay, so the first one is all about reframing that negative self-talk. You know, that voice that's like, I don't know what to do or I'm not good enough. It's like, how can we shift that inner dialogue to be more supportive and empowering?
Yeah, because it can be brutal in there.
Oh, it can be so mean. So instead of saying, I don't know what to do, try saying something like, I'm ready for a new strategy.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's about shifting from that fixed mindset to a growth mindset.
So it's like you're changing the script in your head.
Exactly.
Instead of feeling defeated, you're like, okay, what can I do about this?
Totally. And the second tool builds on this by talking about the balance between explaining and expressing.
Okay.
So we've talked about how perfectionists love control.
Yes.
And one way this shows up is by over-intellectualizing our emotions. Like we try to explain them away instead of actually feeling them.
Oh my God. This is me. Like, I'm the queen of over-explaining my feelings.
It's so common though.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness.
But the book really encourages us to find that balance. It's not about suppressing our analytical side, but it's also about creating space to actually feel those emotions fully.
Yeah, because it's like we can get so in our heads about it that we don't actually let ourselves experience what's going on.
Exactly, and that's where we get stuck. So the third tool is all about the difference between holding opinions and holding judgments.
Okay, explain that to me.
Okay, so an opinion is just like your perspective on a situation, right? Like, I think this is a good idea or I don't like that. But a judgment is when you assign a value, usually negative, to yourself or someone else based on that opinion.
Oh, I see.
So, for example, let's say you make a mistake at work.
Yeah.
You can have the opinion that you made a mistake without also judging yourself as being incompetent or unworthy because of it.
Oh, that's good because it's like separating our actions from like who we are as a person.
Exactly.
Right.
And that leads perfectly into the fourth tool, which is swapping better or worse thinking for different thinking.
Different thinking. Okay, I like it already.
Yeah. So like we talked about, so much of our suffering comes from comparing ourselves to others, right?
Constantly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the book tells this really funny story about the Hermit Crab Real Estate Co. to illustrate this point. Yeah, it's like this whole thing about how hermit crabs are always trying to find the perfect shell and they're constantly comparing themselves to each other. And it's just this like really funny but insightful way of looking at how we do the same thing in our own lives.
Oh my gosh, we're all just crabs in a bucket.
Basically. But the point is, it's about recognizing that our journey is valid and valuable, even if it looks different from everyone else's.
Yeah, like we don't have to be better or worse. We're just on our own path.
Exactly. And embracing that different thinking can be so freeing.
Okay, I love these. I'm ready for the next 3 tools. What do we got?
Okay, so tool number 5 is a big one for perfectionists asking for help.
Oh, yeah. It's a tough one.
It is, because we tend to pride ourselves on our independence, and we often equate asking for help with weakness.
100%.
Yeah, but the book reframes this and says that asking for help is actually a sign of strength and self-awareness.
Yeah.
Because it takes courage to admit when you need support.
It does.
And that ties into the sixth tool, which is about identifying and honoring your values. Because when we're clear about what truly matters to us, it's easier to make choices that are aligned with our authentic selves.
Yeah, it's like you have that internal compass that can guide you through all the noise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, and the final tool is one that I think a lot of us need to hear, especially perfectionists: prioritize sleep.
Oh, sleep.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by sleep, and I'm also terrible at it.
Same.
Yeah.
But the book goes into the science of why sleep is so crucial for our well-being, and it talks about this thing called the glymphatic system.
The what?
The glymphatic system. It's basically our brain's cleaning crew.
What?
Yeah, so when we sleep, this system kicks into high gear and clears out all the toxins that have built up throughout the day.
No way.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
It's amazing.
So when we're not sleeping enough, our brains are like literally full of trash.
Basically.
Oh my God.
It's so important.
I am going to prioritize sleep after this. I'm telling you.
Please do.
Okay, so those 7 tools are amazing, but I have to imagine that there's more to it than just like implementing these strategies, right?
You're absolutely right. These tools are super powerful, but they work best within a larger context of self-compassion and connection, which the book explores in depth.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I wanted to ask you about self-compassion. I feel like it's one of those words that gets thrown around a lot, but what does it actually look like in practice, especially for someone who struggles with perfectionism?
That's such a good question. For perfectionists, self-compassion is like the antidote to that harsh inner critic.
Okay.
It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a close friend who's going through a tough time.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's not about letting ourselves off the hook or ignoring our mistakes. It's just about approaching those imperfections with a little bit more gentleness.
So it's like giving ourselves permission to be human.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're all messy and imperfect, and that's okay.
Yeah. So much easier said than done, though, right?
Yeah, it really is.
Especially when you're so used to that, like, inner drill sergeant.
Totally. But the more we can practice self-compassion, the easier it becomes.
Yeah.
And the book also emphasizes the importance of connection, particularly when we're navigating the challenges of perfectionism.
Why is connection so important in this process?
Well, for one, it reminds us that we're not alone in this struggle.
Yeah.
The book introduces this concept of liminal spaces, which are those in-between phases of life where we're shedding old versions of ourselves and stepping into the unknown.
Oh, those liminal spaces are so uncomfortable.
They are.
But also, like, really important.
They are, because they're where the growth happens.
Yeah.
But they can also be really scary, and it's easy to get stuck there and resist that discomfort.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where connection comes in.
Okay.
Having people in our lives who understand what we're going through, who can offer support and encouragement without judgment, is essential during those times.
It's like having that sense of we're in this together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's this really powerful example in the book about a woman named Rebecca who's battling procrastination and self-doubt, and she ends up buying her dream home in LA.
Wow.
And her story really highlights how those small, consistent steps, coupled with a supportive community, can lead to massive transformations.
It's so true, though. It's like we often get so caught up in the big picture that we forget about the power of those small daily actions.
Exactly. And the book also talks about resistance, which is that inner voice that tries to keep us safe in our comfort zone, even when we know deep down we're ready for something more.
Oh, yes. I know that voice well.
We all do.
Yeah.
But the more we can connect with others who've walked a similar path, who've faced those fears and come out stronger, the more courage we'll have to push through that resistance.
It's like we need those role models to show us that it's possible.
Exactly. And the book really reframes our understanding of success.
Okay, how so?
Well, it encourages us to shift our focus from achieving a specific outcome to embracing the process of growth and change.
I love that because it takes the pressure off having to have it all figured out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not about the destination, it's about the journey.
Yeah, and it's about like who we become along the way.
Exactly.
It's so easy to get caught up in those moments of self-doubt and think, I'm not where I need to be yet. But like you said, it's a journey, not a destination. And I think this whole idea of embracing the ups and downs really resonates with me.
Yeah.
One thing that I think trips me up a lot is this pressure to be productive all the time.
Yeah.
You know, like we always have to be striving and achieving and checking things off the to-do list.
Well, yeah, that always-on mentality is everywhere, especially for perfectionists.
Yeah.
But the book actually challenges us to redefine our relationship with productivity.
Okay, I like that.
Like, true productivity comes from a place of balance and alignment with our values, not from this constant pushing and striving.
So it's not about how much we get done, it's about how we feel and whether we're living in a way that feels true to us. Which makes me think about all this advice we hear about, like, fixing our weaknesses.
Yeah.
You know, like, so much of the self-improvement stuff is about figuring out where we fall short and then working really hard to improve those areas. What does the book say about that?
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I think it's something that perfectionists especially are really drawn to, this idea that we need to fix our flaws in order to be worthy or successful.
Oh, yeah, we love a good self-improvement project.
Exactly. But the book kind of flicks that script on its head.
Okay, how so?
It encourages us to focus on maximizing our strengths instead of getting bogged down and trying to fix everything that we perceive as a weakness.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Because it's like, instead of trying to be good at everything, you can really excel in the areas where you naturally shine.
Exactly. We all have these unique talents and abilities, and the world needs us to share those gifts. It's not about being good at everything. It's about owning those strengths and celebrating them and finding ways to use them in a way that feels really fulfilling.
Yeah, it's like giving ourselves permission to shine our own unique light rather than dimming it to try to fit in with everyone else. And I think that's so important because it's so easy to get caught up in comparing ourselves to others and thinking, oh, I wish I had their talent, or if only I was better at that.
Oh, totally.
But what if we took all that energy and we poured it into cultivating our strengths instead?
Right. Imagine the possibilities. And the book actually gives some tips for how to do that. Like, it encourages us to pay attention to what energizes us. What are those activities that leave us feeling lit up and inspired? Because those are often clues to where our strengths lie.
Yeah.
And it also emphasizes the importance of seeking feedback from people that we trust, people who see our strengths and can help us identify those areas where we naturally excel.
Yeah, sometimes we need that outside perspective to really see ourselves clearly.
Totally. And then once we have a better understanding of our strengths, it's about creating opportunities to use them in a way that feels meaningful and aligned with our values.
Yeah.
You know, finding those spaces where we can really thrive.
I love that. Gosh, this whole conversation has been so insightful and thought-provoking. It's really challenged my beliefs about perfectionism and has given me a whole new perspective on how to approach it in a way that feels healthier and more empowering.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear. And I really hope that listeners will come away from this feeling inspired to embrace their own unique journey with perfectionism, with all of its imperfections. You know, it's not about achieving this unattainable ideal of perfection. It's about learning to navigate the messy, beautiful reality of being human.
Yes, 100%. If there's one thing I'm taking away from this conversation, it's that perfectionism doesn't have to be a life sentence of self-criticism and pressure. We are already whole and worthy, and by embracing our imperfections and prioritizing self-compassion, we can unlock our authentic power and live a more joyful and fulfilling life.
Beautifully said. And remember, the journey is ongoing. You know, there will be setbacks, there will be moments when that inner critic pops up.
Yeah.
But by focusing on connection, both with yourself and with others, you can navigate those challenges with so much more resilience and self-acceptance.
And something to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive. The book talks about how often we're held back by the fear of judgment from both ourselves and others. So what if instead of striving for this unattainable ideal of perfection, we focused on showing up authentically, embracing our imperfections, and celebrating the journey stumbles? And what kind of freedom and joy might that unlock for us?
Now, that's something to think about.